Hi, Andrew. Thanks for making time to talk to us today. It's great to see you. This series of films is very much about getting to know the composers that we're working with here at ABRSM. So why don't we launch straight in and Andrew, just tell us a little bit about yourself. What do we need to know?
Well, thank you for having me here today, Lincoln. Um, I suppose I'm here to chat in a way about myself and kind of my time leading up to and on the ABRSM Composer scheme, new for this year. Um, and so, I sort of came into composition a bit by accident. I mean, I grew up in, I guess, what you could call a quite musical household. I had a brother and a sister who were both very, very good at music, and they were around a similar age, so they always were kind of improvising, making up tunes, that kind of stuff on the piano amongst themselves, that kind of thing. And for the longest time, I learned piano as well myself, but for the longest time, that was all I knew about composition, was kind of through what they were doing, maybe through kind of what my teachers were saying about, like, oh, you can noodle and make tunes and that kind of stuff, but um, it never really clicked. And then this is the thing. I don't think I was as as proactive or curious maybe as I am now. Back when I was however many years old, and I sort of never, I guess, never bothered to really look further afield. And it was only in my sort of high school years, I was introduced to a lot more kind of varied music, not only, kind of within the classical sphere, but also world musics. And also that allowed me to make links with the kind of stuff that I was listening to anyway, like, jazz, Blue Note albums, various, indie
Yep.
things from the 80s, that kind of thing. And it was through that basically, I started to sort of tinker, let's say, with kind of the idea of composing. And one thing led to another. Had some really, really supportive and encouraging teachers who basically just asked for pieces, or suggested, if you were to write something for this, you're writing it for an assignment anyway, why not give it to us to play? And that sort of just built momentum. And then next thing you know, I kind of figured out this is actually what I want to do. This has been my calling my entire life, and I've kind of been not blinkering myself, but like kind of a bit blind to the fact that it is really something that I could have pursued, and it is really something that can be fulfilling, both to myself, but as well as, like, players, audiences, younger people especially. And I suppose, bringing it back to the ABRSM thing, that's kind of why I'm so excited to be part of this. Really, it's the idea. It's, again, cliches, but it is really about the idea of, like, kind of giving back. I feel, I've been incredibly fortunate to be able to get where I am now, and it was sort of all really just a culmination of various coincidences and
Yep.
positive things kind of happening at the right moments, and can't help but think. I mean, this isn't only true of music either, but, like, I can't help but think there are countless people out there who, haven't had those chances, or things haven't lined up for them in the same way, or, like me when I was younger, never even realized it was a thing that they could go for in the first instance, even if they had kind of the spark or the talent, or what have you. So that's why I'm really excited to be
No,
part of
it's
this.
great. No, thanks, Andrew. I think there's a couple of things to pick up on there. I like that idea of tinkering and playing around and exploring because, in many ways, sometimes the idea of being a composer feels like a bit of a dark art. How do I become one? What is it? How do I do it? And actually, you've described there that idea of noodling around, trying, experimenting, listening, learning. That's how you get started, actually. And then you
It's
realize at a
so
certain
true.
point, you think, okay, this is for me. I want to learn some more.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing. It's, we grow up learning about music and seeing music as the finished article. So we think of, the masterworks by, say Mozart. I'm ashamed to say, like, I grew up on a diet of Mozart greatest hits compilation albums when I was like 7 or 8, and I thought that was the be all and end all of music. Um, you can edit that out of the video if you want. No,
That's okay. I was about to
but
say so did I,
yeah.
but that's okay.
No, but this is the thing. It's like, we, regardless of era, even songs on the radio, we see them as the finished article, and it's so easy for us to think of, like, our own practice and see that and be like, well, I'm not writing things first time off the bat that are perfect like that. So obviously I'm not cut out for it. But what you don't see when you see or hear these compositions being performed is, the hours of proverbial blood, sweat, tears, and just hard graft that has gone into them. And also the idea that, like we were saying about like tinkering, people are trying things out and seeing if they work quite a lot of the time, and then going back, revising, and then, kind of two steps forward, one step back sort of approach. And
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. I think we can all afford to, actively encourage ourselves to make mistakes sometimes, I think.
That's a really important message, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Try, fail, try again,
Yeah.
succeed. I'm kind of interested, Andrew, from that about, in the world we're in now, here we are, 2021, global influences, huge amounts of music that you can get access to at the click of a finger or a mouse or a tablet. It's there for you. How do you go about finding an authentic voice? How do you find Andrew's voice when you're listening to Mozart, you're listening to traditional African, you're listening to the latest contemporary hit that's coming out of the States? It's all there, it's everywhere. How do you find what you want to say?
It's an interesting question, and to be honest, I think it's one that I'm still trying to figure out for myself.
Yeah,
Quite rightly, I think, especially nowadays, you can go onto YouTube, search up a composer, and you'll have basically all of their compositions listed out. Or you go into Spotify and you find like a band or other streaming service, that kind of thing. It's so immediate, and in a way, like, I definitely found it easier to compose when I was younger because there wasn't all that stuff floating around, and I could feel like I was free from its influence. But at the same time, like, I do think having all that there in a way can be a real boon to oneself in their creative practice, because it gives you a taste of everything that's out there, things that you could never have dreamed of yourself, or things that are really kind of specific to other cultures or other worlds, that you can now immerse yourself into, you dive into like head first. And I think the idea of finding your own authentic voice from amongst that, it's a personal process to everyone. Everyone kind of does it differently.
yeah,
But the main thing is that you should be, I mean, I feel this about myself, and I'm sure many composers feel the same ways, but you should be trying to write something that, you feel like you're enjoying writing, and you would enjoy hearing yourself, And I think if you start with that as your base kind of motto or axiom, that kind of thing, that's, it almost doesn't matter past a certain point if your work isn't like kind of your voice, because that's something that's a constant process of discovery, isn't it? Again, the idea of you try, not say you fail, but you make things that maybe you're not happy with, and then you try again. And I think it's that process of sort of being self-reflective and kind of just aware of what you're doing in
yeah.
your own practice, like in a sort of thoughtful way. I think that's what guides you ultimately.
That's a good one to store up. I'm going to hang on to that one myself, about ultimately write something that you yourself would like to play, would like to hear, would like to engage with. It's a really good thing to hang on to for anyone. I'm interested, Andrew, in this world of kind of possibility that we've just been playing around with there. It's great to have you as part of our initial cohort of mentees on the ABRSM program. And in many ways, the first task we've set you to write a grade 1 piano piece, which I know you've written and I've enjoyed having a look at.
Oh,
It's about narrowing down the possibilities in many ways to say what you can do, but actually also what you can't use because of the nature of the composition task. How does that feel as a composer? That actually is that restricting you, or is that actually quite a fun thing to do because it's such a different task?
see, personally speaking, I love the kind of restrictions, but I'll get back to that. Like, I just want to say firstly, this whole thing of, your creative ideas colliding with the very physical, practical reality of what can and can't be done, like not just within a grade 1 piano piece, but
Yeah.
say for a string quartet or an orchestra, that kind of thing. I think that's like the fundamental sort of, I guess, challenge of composition is sort of, you have your ideas and they're strong and you know what you want to do with them, but there are just some things that certain groups, certain ensembles, certain instruments can't do. And
Yeah.
I think one thing you learn, as a composer, as you develop your craft and your style, your taste, what have you, is how to sort of negotiate those individual sort of feelings with the demands and expectations and practicalities of writing for all these other ensembles. So in the case of a grade one piece, I mean, there are things that grade one beginner pianists can do, and there are some things that obviously they can't. I mean, like if you've only been learning to a grade one standard, you know, that's kind of a given. But that doesn't mean that you can't create something that's fun, that's engaging, that feels, you know, really, really, I guess involved in the same way that, like, you know, I'm saying this hypothetically, I can't play the Rachmaninoff piano concerto, but like if I was playing Rachmaninoff 3 or something like that, I would feel deep and kind of consumed with the music. And I think you can do the same thing with a grade one piece for a beginner learner, that kind of thing. So I sort of enjoy the challenge of paraphrase of Stravinsky that I'm going to butcher, but it's kind of about how sort of restrictions in music are sort of the mother of invention. It kind of forces you to be more creative and think about what the limits and sort of extents of possibility are and kind of what you're creating. And for me, that was really fun. And it provides a nice alternative to having a blank sheet of paper and being told, write whatever you want.
I'm interested. It's interesting there that you talk about that relationship between a composer and performer. It might be whether, again, that the grade one pianist or the professional string quartet player or an orchestra. Actually, you as a composer, you're writing for them. You're wanting to challenge them, but also respect where they are. It's that dynamic, isn't it? Which is really important. Composer and performer working together. That's ultimately what we're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's you know, it's an interesting thing because certainly in my kind of early stage professional practice, that's something I've really loved to do, is engage directly and collaboratively with individuals or small ensemble groups, that kind of thing. I recently was writing a piece for and kind of with Wu Wei, the sheng player, this Chinese mouth organ, really interesting ancient instrument. But that was incredible because there was just this back and forth on ideas and possibilities and that kind of thing. Of course, it's a completely different thing when you're sort of trying to write for the everyman, as it were, for this anonymous kind of both idealized and completely vague kind of version of what a grade one pianist, let's say, is. And that was I found that to be something I'd never really experienced before, because I think up to now, like, I've made a point of, you know, treating music as a very literally sort of collaborative thing. But at the same time, I think there are ways that you can do that even within these more, like, I guess, anonymous or open access kind of pieces. Is, you know, there are ways to really give a performer license and freedom and ownership ultimately over that piece and what they create from the piece. Because at the end of the day, like, what we do as composers really is just provide very specific kind of roadmaps, just dots on a page, that kind of thing, and the actual creation of the music only, to my mind anyway, you can argue the semantics of this all day, but to my mind, the music happens when it's being played, right? And
it's a really interesting one for ABRSM, because I think we're with you, and you know, again, with the new performance grades that we've got going out to the blocks now, that is about performance. That is about taking a piece of music, realizing what you want to say through it, and performing it, presenting it, telling your story through it. It's really important.
Absolutely.
Andrew, you've mentioned a few things as we've gone along there, but beside the grade one piano piece and various other collaborations, what else are you working on at the moment? What does professional life as a composer look like right now?
So I've only just finished up my master's degree at the Royal College of Music in London. So in a way, I do have a fair bit of professional work on. I just finished up this solo project with Wu Wei, as I mentioned. But for the moment, it's kind of me, you know, looking to the future and seeing what plans I have already, and then how I work my other plans around it, that kind of thing. Because there are all these sort of nice, vague, I guess, like, dream projects that I want to do that I can sort of, I guess, if I find the time and the sort of will, I could probably put together myself. But it's more just finding a practical way to do that. So the big one on the horizon is recently I was quite lucky to get a commission through the RPS Composer scheme, or the RPS prize, and that was I mean, it came as a bit of a shock. I'll be honest, but like a very like positive
A
surprise.
good shock. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And for that, I'll be writing a new, still some details TBC, but possibly not by the time actually this goes to air, as it were. But it's for the Cheltenham Festival,
Yep.
and
Right.
it will be a chamber work. Not sure who it's for quite yet, but I'm really looking forward to that. But the thing about that, right, is because that takes place July next year, so there's this big gap now, kind of for me to sort of figure out what to be doing with myself in the meantime. So of course,
Yeah.
a few bits and bobs that I can't really talk about yet, that hopefully might play out. And then also things almost separate, I guess, to my, call it separate. It's separate but related to my compositional life. So I also actively perform as a jazz pianist. So
Yep.
I've been doing a bit of that. I mean, the gigs, live performances is back, which is quite nice to
Yep.
have.
Fantastic.
Um,
Yep.
I've been trying to develop my ability to sing and play at the same time as well. That's kind of a fun one, because I'm not a very good singer. But don't tell anyone
Don't
who's
tell
hiring
anyone.
me.
No, we
That's
won't.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this I've always thought I have like the voice of Chet Baker, basically. So I'm trying to put that to good use. Um, and then there's also a quite very exciting, but I can't talk too much about it thing. But it involves a group of my colleagues, some who've graduated, some who are still at the Royal College, who are into partly improvised contemporary performance, and with live electronics, which I may or may not be facilitating. We have some really interesting things coming up for that, not only just performances, but also things in different settings, things involving like direct live workshops with young people, which I'm
Right.
really looking forward to. So keep your eyes,
No,
ears
no, it's
peeled.
good. I tell you, there's a nice smattering there of dream projects and projects you can't talk to us about, and things that are very specific. It's great. And in many ways, it's a reminder, isn't it, that this, in part what we're doing through these films is trying to bust a few myths about what it is to be a composer. And you've just described there, it's about being a musician, who is writing, who is performing, who's experimenting, who's maybe working with young people, who's maybe working with communities, who's collaborating with colleagues. All of those things make up that kind of portfolio of who and what you are as you move forward. I think, Andrew, I'd be really keen for you to share any nuggets, if you like, with someone who's watching this who thinks, actually, I think I'd like to be a composer. It might be because they're a youngster in a school. It might be because there's someone later in life who's engaged in music but hasn't yet set their ideas down. How do you get started, or any kind of top tips, if you like, for composing and being a composer?
I guess the first one is that you can compose. This is
Yeah.
this is the thing. It's it was kind of like we were saying before. I mean, people sort of see existing music and expect themselves, either I can do that straight off the bat, create these fully formed masterworks or great songs, that kind of thing, or I don't have it in me. Whereas it's really the result of a long time of development and kind of hard work and persistence. And I think anyone who has even any tiny musical inclination has the potential within them to be a composer. And I think just remember to hold on to that, because, and I forget who said this, but there was this great quote about how, the reason we are unsatisfied with our music sometimes is because the development of our own taste is outpacing the development of our own technique. But that's
Uh-huh.
kind of what also drives you forward to keep creating, keep making better stuff. So just have the confidence to do it. And also, the again, I think it's to do with sort of preconceptions about composers, kind of the idea that a composer is someone who writes and does nothing else, or is completely separate from the players until the day that they walk into the rehearsal hall, and then get lots of questions, that kind of thing. Being a composer can be what it means to you, and that can involve an intersection of your own playing. It can involve working with other people. It can be that private thing that you do. It can be even, like working in your DAW on your like electronics kind of stuff. Like it can really be anything. But the thing is, it's like everyone has that potential to be creative and create something really special, and something that can be impactful.
That's great. I mean, I think, take from that sense of confidence, belief, a reminder that you need people around you. It might be parents, it might be family, it might be colleagues who say, yep, you can, give it a go, try it. And I'll go back to something earlier in the chat about that sense of writing things that you care about, that mean something to you, that you would enjoy playing or listening to or sharing, are probably a pretty good things to take forward. Andrew, it's just slightly off script. I just wanted to ask, just because you've mentioned sort of electronics and digital and all that a little bit through the conversation. Just what's your prediction of the future? In terms of we've lived over the last 18 months or so in particular, where making music remotely and through digital means has risen to the fore, and I suspect would share a view that ultimately music is a live, visceral subject that you need to be in the same room as the performers to really appreciate. Where are we heading with all this? How are we going to bring these worlds together, or are they set to collide and be thought of as different?
I think I take the view that they're complementary to one another. Because just for example, I mean, of course, I mean, maybe we're a bit fatigued by the number of remote recordings we're seeing out there, but I think, say, for a young composer who wants to hear their work performed in a live kind of setting, like the ability and the fact that it's now kind of acceptable to just go out there and ask your friends, can you multi-track this to a click, that kind of thing. Yeah. I think that's really, really valuable to individuals in a way where it would normally be like a logistical nightmare to set up a rehearsal and trying to, doodle polls and all this kind of thing. But yeah, I agree. I think there is an importance to sort of making sure these things stay interconnected, and this is kind of my sort of view on a lot of aspects of music and just art generally, is that we sort of there's a tendency, or it becomes quite easy for us to view specific things within, say, music as kind of self-contained and unrelated to. So even like when I was growing up, I mean, I did my piano grades with a certain other competitor to ABRSM back in Australia, who I shall not mention, but they, I never made the connection between, doing piano as this and then the people who are out there doing it as their career. And it was just things like that. It feels often at times that the world of music, say in education or on the radio or in the conservatoire or in the concert hall, they feel like all these kind of separate things when really they do feed into one another. And my hope, with the sort of digital explosion, as it were, is that kind of this opening up of access and kind of interest in the arts can feed back in a complementary way into what's happening in the room, what's happening, that electricity is, as you were kind of referring to. So yeah, I think that's kind of my take.
Yeah, that's great. I think take from that sense of connectivity and collaboration, really important. Look, Andrew, thank you for the conversation. Really, really enjoyed it. We look forward to hearing your music through ABRSM, Grade 1 piano piece and beyond, and staying in touch with your projects, dreamlike and secret and known as they move forward. So thanks again for your time, Andrew, and we look forward to getting to know you and your music even better.
Thank you for today, Lincoln. It's a pleasure.